We do want to begin by kind of acknowledging the incredibly challenging times that many in California communities are facing with the ongoing wildfire situation. Our thoughts are with all those affected, and please know that their well-being and safety of those communities is top of mind as we gather today. Also wanted to start and say my co-presenters and I are joining from New Mexico. We gratefully acknowledge the land and the original peoples of New Mexico. Central New Mexico Community College sits on the homelands of Pueblo people near the Pueblo of Sandia, the Pueblo of Isleta, the Pueblo of Laguna, and the Pueblo of Santa Ana. People of the Pueblo, Navajo, Apache, and Ute nations in New Mexico have historically ongoing relationships with this land. We also recognize that acknowledgement is insufficient, and we stand in solidarity with Indigenous peoples here and globally in the struggle for equity, justice, sovereignty, and the reclamation of homeland. We do want to thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate that you've chosen to spend some time in your day engaging with us. My name is Kristen Ferris. I'm the Senior Director for Assessment at Central New Mexico Community College, and I'm joined by my colleagues Judith and Carly, who can introduce themselves if they want.
Hi, I'm Judith Thomason, and I'm Director of Accreditation and Institutional Effectiveness here at CNM. I have been faculty member for many, many years, so I'm relatively new in my recent role working with accreditation and institutional effectiveness, but I have been very actively participating and contributing to our assessment efforts as faculty member, assessment coordinator, department chair, and so forth. So thanks for joining us today.
Hi, my name's Carly Preston, and I am the Fine Arts Chair here at CNM. I'm also a theater professor here and department head of the Theater and Dance Department. I sit on our SAC committee, which oversees the assessment collection, which I'm sure Kristen's going to talk about a little bit. And I'm the STA rep for that. So, and I'm the assessment coordinator for the theater and dance department. So wear a lot of different hats and have been working with assessment formerly at other schools I've worked at. So it's been an exciting process at CNM, and I'm glad to be here to talk about it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I wanted to just give you a little bit of context about our institution for those of you who are not familiar with it. CNM is the largest higher education institution in New Mexico in terms of undergraduate enrollment. We have over 2,000 faculty members, more or less, and about 20,000 students every year. We have 186 associate degree programs that cover 87 different fields of study, everything from the fine arts and everything that Carly mentioned to trades, healthcare programs, and our liberal arts as well. So all of this is to really just say that we have a lot of assessment going on, and we're trying to engage a large number of faculty as we do the work. In addition to all of this, we also have state mandated what they call Gen Ed essential skills that all have core components, which essentially are like learning outcomes for each one of those that we're required to assess for any of our transferable Gen Ed courses. And I'll say too, as we're going through, feel free to stop at any time and ask questions, come off of mute or put them in the chat. And we'll have time at the end as well, hopefully to engage in a discussion, because I know I always learn a lot from other institutions at these types of things as well. All right, so the challenge that we were facing with our assessment work included accreditor feedback that we lacked a systematic approach to collecting assessment data across our 7 different academic schools. We also heard this anecdotal phrase from faculty that felt they spent 90% of their time collecting data, which left them only with 10% of their time to do kind of any sort of analysis or make any kind of meaningful change. In addition to this, most of the assessment data that they did collect was sort of raw test scores that were kind of collected in Excel spreadsheets with no additional information attached to the numbers, which made it really difficult to identify any performance gaps of note. based on things like demographic, delivery type, was it online versus face-to-face, short-term versus traditional term course length, and things like that. So all of these things sort of led us to kind of want to shift focus from primarily data collection and like sort of that compliance mindset around completing assessment reports to more of an analysis approach with actionable outcomes. And so I'll say too that this has been a 4-year journey. So we just finished our first year of what is a 2-year assessment cycle in December. And so we're new to it. And so I don't promise to have like all the answers for you, but want to just share with you kind of where we were and where we're going. And hopefully you can learn something from us. So the solution, to kind of some of these problems that we were having was really to use the competency tool in Brightspace. So Brightspace is our LMS. I'm not sure how many of you use Brightspace or maybe something else like Canvas. I think they probably all have a similar tool. In Brightspace, it's called the competency tool. And so what we did in there is we added all of the gen ed essential skills, all the program learning outcomes. And in the cases where programs have external accreditors, like our early childhood program is going through the NACE accreditation, we put all of those standards in there as well. And the benefit and what this lets us do is then tie any one of those learning outcomes or multiple outcomes to any sort of assessment, assignment, quiz, or discussion post within the LMS. So we can set all of those up. A lot of our courses at CNM have like a master shell. So we can set it up in the master shell, and then as they copy the courses to all the faculty members, it's already there. All they have to do is grade the assignment. They don't even maybe necessarily know they're conducting assessment for the program, right? There are a handful of programs that don't have a master shell, and so we have resources for those faculty to set up the mapping on their own. They can reach out to somebody, one of the assessment coaches. We have faculty who get project comp or course release to serve in the assessment coach role to kind of help the programs in their discipline or in their academic school through the assessment process. They know how to do the mapping. They can reach out to me or any one of our Brightspace specialists to help them set up the mapping. And so what this does then is, like I said, they don't even necessarily know they're doing the assessment when they're grading the assignment, but on the back end, the data is coming out of Brightspace. It's linked to our student information system. We use Banner right now. And so we can pull all of the demographic data about those students as well. What their credit hours are, what their declared major is, all these types of information is now attached to what used to just be a raw number. So this is helping us kind of shift that focus from the collection of data to the analysis, with the option to disaggregate by things like part of term, declared major, race, gender, ethnicity, age, the number of credit hours, if they're a new student or a returning student. There's a long laundry list. I think I have a slide somewhere in here, and some may say I've given them too many options. So we might need to filter that down. That's kind of a lesson that we've learned. But it started with the mapping in the LMS. And then I'll show you. So it pulls the data out. We match it on the back end, like I said, to Banner. And we use SAS as our data visualization tool. So this is a screenshot. I'm sorry I couldn't sign in. The VPN and the dashboard were causing bandwidth issues, and I was freezing when I was testing it earlier. But I do want to say my email is at the end of this presentation. And so if anybody wants to get in and dig in and play around in the dashboard or look at what we do in Brightspace, we spent a whole term a year and a half ago, the spring term in, I guess, 2023, learning what we could and couldn't do in Brightspace in terms of mapping assessments. So I have a lot of information there if anybody wants to chat about that, if they use Brightspace as well. So what you see right here is a breakdown of, so it's the threshold. We have 3 different ways we can display the data. If it's a quiz score, we can do it that way. We can do met threshold or not, or we can do the actual rubric score. Like if it was a rubric with a score of 1, 2, 3, or 4, we could break the data down that way. Right now, it's just showing did they meet the threshold or not. Usually on a rubric, that would be like 3 or above. The overall data for this Gen Ed Essential Skills Science, the learning outcome specific is the quantitative reasoning one. And what you can see here, overall, everybody was at 79%. But we broke it down by the academic school. You see the math, science, and engineering students, 100% of them met that threshold as compared to 50% of our education students, right? So that tells us something about this gen ed essential skill and where we need to focus more on some of these quantitative reasoning skills. Here's like that laundry list of different ways we can group the data. Don't expect you to read it, but then this grouping also kind of duplicates down with the filter. So if we just wanted to, we could filter overall by age and break it down, or if we wanted to just look at our dual credit students, we could just pull that age group of 0 to 17. Or we could look at it by, like I said, race, gender, ethnicity, credit hours, what's their declared major, what was their English placement scores, what were their math placement scores before they got into these courses. Many different ways to kind of disaggregate the data that we didn't have the capability to do before. And here's another example where we're looking at a different gen ed essential skill. This one's in communication, and broke it down by reported ethnicity. So you'll see that it's the Native American students that are kind of fell behind whatever the target was. I think this one was 82 overall that had met that threshold. I don't know about you all at your institutions. We had a large number of programs in the past that would say, oh, we had a target of 80%, we met it, and they would kind of stop filling out the assessment report after that, which is, you know, especially when programs are accredited and the accreditor sets those standards. I don't want to dismiss like meeting those targets. It's very good. But in the past, they would be like, we're good. This means our curriculum is good. We don't have to do anything else. So now I can encourage them to go in and look at it more and say, well, is everybody performing at that level? Because if they're not, you know, we're only as good as our lowest performing students, in my opinion. And so now we know, okay, the Native American students are not meeting that same target that everybody else is. And we can look at it by the activity. Maybe there's one activity that's not really culturally relevant, or we can break it down by the course. Maybe, you know, everybody in the English course is doing well, but some folks in one of the humanities is where they're falling behind. We can kind of really pinpoint where that's happening. And then we can, my first go-to is usually to tell faculty to offer more kind of formative assessments when we see these types of gaps. But I do acknowledge that kind of takes more time on the part of the faculty. So we also have our CTL, our Cooperative for Teaching and Learning, who has peer learning coaches that we can hook these faculty up with to say, okay, we found this gap in the data. Now what can I do about it? And they have this other peer that they can work with. Or if they're in a larger program like English, there's already like 300 faculty that they can talk to. But some of our smaller programs really can benefit from having one of these peer learning coaches to talk through, like, what do we do now that we've identified this gap? All right, so what does this mean, right? One of the goals was to kind of readjust the faculty time and resource allocation. There is a clear reduction in manual data collection time, which has increased the time available for data analysis and narrative development. It doesn't mean that's always happening. We are, like I said, trying to shift the whole culture. We know that changing the hearts and minds of faculty kind of takes time, but also the work is still hard, right? The data collection piece, like, it's not always fun to like herd cats and try and nudge your colleagues to get information from them, but it's not as hard as sitting down and really reflecting on what does the data mean and like having a conversation with your colleagues. And so what I've been trying to do is really work with administration, the deans and associate deans, to say, we need to give the faculty the time and the space to have these conversations. This is not a conversation that's going to happen just like over email. So trying to get them to take a chunk of their time at department meetings to really focus on this assessment data. Now that we have this thick, rich data, let's use it and let's talk about it. And so you can see here, there's just a couple of quotes that I pulled from an evaluation of our revised process. As I mentioned, we're only 1 year in, so there's still lessons to be learned, and we'll see what the ultimate results of this is at the end of this calendar year. We did move from a 1 year assessment cycle to 2 years so that we have time to kind of measure the change. We used to go in, collect the data, analyze the data, mention what the change would be, and then we would move on to our next set of learning outcomes and assess them. But now we go back, we make the change, we measure again, and we'll see if we really had an impact or not on the student learning. Let's see. All right, so this work hasn't been without challenges. As I mentioned, this kind of change work can be hard. We changed the timeline, we changed the reporting tool that people used, we changed, the way that they can collect data. It's not mandatory that anybody use this LMS for the data collection, but we are, strongly encouraging it. One of the things that we can do, in my office, we have 4 business analysts that if they're using Brightspace, then we have that data. And we can help kind of give them an analysis of here's what the data shows us, right? They still need to decide what that means for them. But we can't do that if the data was collected basically any other way. So the challenges that we faced, I think hopefully we're not unique in this, but reaching large numbers of faculty can be quite tricky. So we formed a cross-disciplinary communication sub-team, and Judith was actually the chair of that team, to handle the communications and share information about the new process, right? So we held several information sessions, including on the weekends, before we rolled this process out to all of the college. We did a 2-year pilot first. As I mentioned, this has been a 4-year journey. And we offered door prizes to encourage attendance. And really what we did there was just like, hey, this thing is coming. We didn't want anybody to say, I didn't know about this when we launched it for the full college. And to be fair, nobody said that. We could have spent we spent a lot of time on this kind of awareness and maybe less time on the kind of the skill building side of things. So that's a little lesson learned. If we could go back, we would spend maybe equal amount of time on reminding folks what the new tool is, where to access it and how to use that tool. It wasn't that different than the old tool, but it was different enough that it's caused some confusion. Getting information to faculty, I think, is again always a challenge. We originally built a kind of a how-to site for how to go through the assessment process. We broke the assessment process down into 7 steps. So we built a step-by-step sort of just-in-time training within that LMS. What we heard from faculty was that it's hard to find. You have to log into the LMS, you have to find the course, you have to find the step you're working on. So we transitioned that to sort of an open access kind of website that anybody can access at any time, anywhere. I have the QR code at the end of this presentation, so any of you can poke around it whenever you want to try and kind of open up the access, be there with videos and guidance to help faculty through this process whenever they needed it. We also offer workshops, and so these offer one-on-one support and work time. We block out an hour and a half. We started with hybrid ones, so people could join us in person or online. The in-person attendance was low to none, so we just do them virtually now. The first 10 minutes, we kind of go through, here's the step, here's why we do it, here's the how to do it in terms of entering the data into the reporting tool or working with your colleagues to make decisions. But most of that workshop time is just built so that faculty can sit there and do the assessment work, and they can leave and they can be done with that step. And so that's been really helpful for faculty that can attend those. Scheduling those at times when it's convenient for faculty has been a little bit tricky. So we try to offer 3 or 4 for every step each term, so that we can catch as many faculty as possible in those situations. And then there's the dashboard. As I mentioned, I didn't get on it today because I'm at home and I had to get on VPN and it was draining my bandwidth, and just saying VPN to some faculty is enough to get them to not want to do it. They can access it from campus, but we have a lot of faculty that don't always come to campus or not at convenient times when they can actually work on assessment. So that's been a little bit of a barrier. What we do is I or any of the assessment coaches can take screenshots and send that data. We can export the data into Excel if that's something people feel comfortable with, or a CSV. But usually what I do is whenever anybody asks for data, I send them tons of screenshots with lots of different filters. There's always a cover page so that they know what the filters are. But trying to get faculty into that dashboard has been a little bit of a challenge. Also, there's some faculty that are more comfortable digging into data than others. So we at the college as a whole have a kind of this data culture work that's happening. We have a couple of faculty fellows who are doing specific data trainings for faculty, and one of them in particular focusing on looking at sort of a DEI lens to the data. So we have those available for faculty. they can get pay in the summer to go for a couple weeks to what they call the Actionable Equity Institute, where they can sit down and kind of look at their data and look at it by race and gender, ethnicity, and things like that. All right, so as I mentioned, we're only 1 year into the 2-year cycle, but we have a couple of examples that I can share on the impact that it's actually been having on equity. There's no doubt that the ability to kind of pinpoint the disparities now we have that we didn't have before. We can use this disaggregated data to inform targeted interventions. When reading through the reports, I didn't find a ton jumping out at me, but we'll see more of those rolling in this month. One of the examples I saw was similar to what I showed you, right? The overall targets were met, but when we looked at the disaggregated data, actually there was a bar for the people who didn't complete the assessment, and that was the biggest bar, right? So those who maybe took the assessment did really well, but it turns out a lot of the students dropped before that point in the course when they even took the exam. And so that kind of shifted the conversation to student retention and really supporting all students through the course and getting them to the end where they can actually take the assessment. Another example that we saw was similar. Several students didn't complete the assignment. This was one of the fine arts ones. I'm not sure if it was theater or music, but after reflection, students were required to travel and possibly pay to watch a live performance, right? And so that was maybe why so many people weren't dropping in that case. They just hadn't taken the assessment. And so providing free and virtual options to kind of watch a pre-recorded performance provided a more equitable assessment approach. Is there a question?
Yes, there's a question in the chat. And so either as part of this slide or after, the question is, they heard, Will Roberts is saying, they heard you mention that it's not required to use the Brightspace tool. And so what's the adoption rate at this point?
That is a great question. And I can't remember. What I was able to do was pull the prefixes for all the courses that had data in the dashboard. And it was a large number. I suspect that if we mapped those back to academic schools, though, out of the 7 schools, I would say 3 are actively using it. Nursing has their own thing that they've been doing so long, and they have such strict accreditation standards that they were never really interested in adopting the Brightspace methodology. Our trades, a lot of those assessments happen hands-on, right? I think like photovoltaic stuff, they're like in the lab, and that's where everything's happening. So they don't have a big need for it. MSE is using it. That's our math, science, and engineering. Liberal arts has been really big on adopting it. And I think our business, hospitality, tourism is sort of split, where the business computer folks are really into it, and like the hospitality, baking, the trades are less into using the Brightspace. I am hoping to kind of push a little bit for anyone who's doing the general education assessment that we need to do for the state to kind of help make that a little bit more required, because that's something that the college really can use for decision making in multiple different areas. Plus, we're hearing from industry and workforce, right, that our students don't have these soft or sustainable skills, which is what most of our, or at least half of our gen ed essential skills are. So we can start showing them, well, actually, like, here's our data on critical thinking, and our students are actually doing really well. And so kind of have those conversations with our external partners. So I can look up and get you an exact number, but I want to say about 50% right now. Okay, and then the last bullet here, like I said, we are kind of promoting a more equitable learning environment through evidence-based strategies, not just through assessment data, but through that Actionable Equity Institute that I mentioned, and some of the other work that some faculty fellows are doing to kind of skill up all of our faculty in terms of looking at data and making decisions based on the data.
Kristen, just a side note, yes, it was theater and dance for the real life example that you mentioned about requiring the students to watch a performance. And we decided to go a completely different route and come up with a rubric instead of using that one assignment, because so many students were not able. They either they didn't have transportation, or they couldn't afford to attend a performance, so on and so forth. So we had to really meet the students where they were at, in order to collect that data, and do that assessment.
Thanks. All right, so I thought I'd throw an AI slide, not because I'm an expert, because I can't go a day without getting an email in my box about AI in assessment. And so I do want to say that we do have a handful of faculty that have expressed concerns about AI generated student response and kind of undermining the overall data integrity of their assessment data. Like they said, we're assessing how well AI takes our tests, not student learning. So what we've been doing at our college is allowing programs to take a year or two off from that assessment cycle to consider the impacts of AI within their discipline. We're encouraging the faculty to, during these conversations, think about what an authentic assessment might look like. So hands-on activities, real-world problem solving. I'm a fan of ill-structured problems that can be solved multiple different ways, or collaborative sort of group projects. And then, how can we align the assessment with the skills that are needed in the workforce that AI can't replicate? If AI can do it, then my question is, well, then why are these students going to need to be doing this, right? So what kind of skills do we really need? Maybe we need to re-engage with employers about the impact they think AI is going to have, but really kind of trying to reimagine not only what we're teaching them, but how we're assessing them. Oh, the comparing face-to-face to online scores. So there are several programs who anecdotally are saying, yes, the students online are doing better, suspecting that it's because of AI. So some programs right now, they're just going to get some trend data, collect a year or two of data on face-to-face versus online classes and compare those scores and see if they really are statistically significant, better online. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Carly to talk more about the faculty perspective and what they think of this whole thing.
So I introduced myself earlier, but just to kind of hone in on the faculty perspective, I collect the data for the theater and dance department. So I'm the assessment coordinator. So we have assessment coordinators that are like department level that collect the data. And then we have assessment coaches who get the release time and are dedicated, or project comp in order to help on the school level. So I thank God I just do the department. So for my department, it's really small, and I'm the only full-time employee, but we have 11 part-timers. And it's quite a challenge to communicate the different needs and when there are changes, and to actually collect the data. And then if we want to actually, alter something or look at our, learning outcomes or something like that, it's very difficult to get everyone in the same place at the same time, especially many of our part-timers are working, 2 or 3 jobs. So the fact that we can use Brightspace, our learning management system, in order to, load the rubric in there, in our assignments section, and make the changes. We can communicate via email on, small edits or even big changes, kind of get a consensus that way, and then make the changes, load that rubric in there as our assessment tool. Really simplifies things for both part-time faculty and me as the coordinator. And then at the end of the semester, I could simply just send an email to everyone saying, hey, don't forget, make sure you do that assignment. It's hidden from the students, of course. And, it's a quick, the rubric's right there. They can just go through and take the pulse on each student. And all of that data just aggregates directly into FAST, which we use to, pull all of that data together. And they can, even within each, within each student's, where we collect the data on each student, you can actually comment. So if we wanted to make some, anecdotes about why we gave that student, that score on the rubric, or if that student struggled for some reason, you can do that. Where do those comments show up, Kristen? Do you know? Have you seen those comments?
Those would still be in Brightspace, but we could pull out a report.
Right. Everything can be reported. So that's the wonderful thing, too, about it. And it ensures accuracy. It simplifies that collection process, and it allows for us to have, that faculty feedback that's so important on the rubric. Because many times I find myself like working in a vacuum as a, the only full-time faculty member. And there's some other departments that are like that, but even on the larger departments, I have heard other faculty members say, oh, this is a godsend. This is so much easier than having, everybody send me 10 different Excel spreadsheets, and then I have to figure out how to put all of this together. And then I have to do a bunch of data entry into the other system. So from a faculty perspective, it just made things so much easier. Oh yeah, I can pull that up. I'll put a link in the I'll put the file in the chat in just a second. Do the students see the rubric and their scores, or the rubrics? No, it's all hidden. Yes, you're welcome, Lisa. Yeah, it's all hidden from them, from the students, because it's more, you can use the rubric holistically, or you can use it for a specific assignment. We really just want to highlight the strengths each student has, student by student. So that's how we do it in my department. Each department does it differently. And sometimes I think that overwhelms faculty. And when I speak to faculty in meetings, as a SAC representative, I think that sometimes that's overwhelming, because they just want, here, just tell me exactly what to do. But that's kind of the good thing about how you can do things with the universal themes assessment, how we do the assessment at our school, is that you can mold it into what you need to do to highlight the strengths of your students, and to figure out what you need to adjust specifically for your department. It kind of makes the collection process streamlined, but it also allows for differentiation in how each department applies the process, if that makes sense. Everybody can have a unique approach, because the way that we teach in fine arts is not going to be the same way that the sciences are going to teach. And if we all had to approach our learning objectives the same, that would be ludicrous. So, but it is important to adjust your learning, your pedagogy each time that you take this data and look at it. So I really like this new process that we're doing, and I've been trying to sell it to faculty, but each time you say the word data, everybody's like, oh, we're assessment. It's kind of like, nobody wants to hear those words. But anyway, that's kind of my faculty perspective. I'll pull up my rubric and put the file here in the chat. Yeah. Did I forget anything, Kristen?
No, thank you. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'm really cognizant of the fact that I sit on the admin side now, and I don't want to talk about assessment without faculty, because it is a faculty-led process. I'm just here to support. So thank you for your time. And with that, I think we have another expert on accreditation who's going to talk about how this process supports some of our accreditor feedback.
Yeah, so now that I'm on this side of the house, I was engaged with many aspects of this process. But I just wanted to highlight that we may have different institutional accreditors. And I think here, I assume we have a fair amount of colleagues from California, but I saw some other places like Nebraska and other Western states. So our accreditor is the Higher Learning Commission. You also have a WASC, right, in California, as well as the Accrediting Commission for community and junior colleges. So although we have different institutional accreditors, all regional or national accreditors share a fair amount of focus on assessment, data-driven assessment. And a lot of these could be grouped into, I'm using the action, alignment, accountability triad to highlight that we're all expected by our accreditors to have very clear systematic processes for collecting data, for understanding how well our students are learning, for guaranteeing, ensuring quality, right? Alignment with our institutional mission, the type of institution we are. We are a two-year college, so we have very specific types of students, very specific programs. We also have a fair amount of work-based learning initiatives, and increasing our non-academic offerings, although at this point our accreditors are not as interested in that, but I think that will slowly change as we see more of a push for micro-credentials, potentially various ways of integrating work-based learning into integrating back to academic programs. So all that is really also requiring us to focus on assessment in those programs as well, especially if we want to capture some of those students and help them go back to the academic side, right? And so alignment with the institution's mission and alignment with the purpose and goals of the types of education the institution provides, those are very important aspects of assessment and accreditation, how these support each other. And accountability. Since the 90s, when the student learning outcomes, the whole SLO movement and assessment movement became stronger and stronger, now it's a very clear expectation. So a lot of these will influence how an institution organizes its work. And of course, we want to do assessment, even if it's not just for accreditation, right? It's a process that we want to do to ensure quality of learning, that we know if our students are learning, and we can find ways to improve if it's not there, right? So we saw all the assessment data and the approaches we have at CNM, and a lot of you have similar systems in place. So in addition to this being an important continuous improvement opportunity, it's definitely a clear expectation of accreditors. And sometimes we all have to use sort of the accreditation stick to remind our colleagues that this is really important work. And so I know it, as I said, we want to do it because it's the right thing to do, but often we have to use the big accreditation word to remind people how important this is. And it usually works. And I sometimes have to do that to capture people's attention. Let's move on to the next slide and let me know in the meantime if you have questions. This is a bit heavy, but it just expands on the previous slide of action, alignment, and accountability, that almost all accreditors will have very specific expectations for setting goals for student learning, systematically collecting and analyzing data, and using that data for improvement, right? And so in addition, there are other expectations around alignment, around equity, and making sure that our students really exit with good skills in those core competency areas that we set. So all of that has to be in alignment, and institutions are really expected to have mature and robust processes to be able to collect data and act on the findings. So I'll stop here.
Thanks, Judith. So again, I just wanted to kind of reiterate that this has been like a 4-year journey for us. We can see now the potential that sort of integrating our LMS data with the student information data system and putting it into a tool where faculty can sort of play with it in different ways is going to open up a lot of opportunities, but there's some work to be done on our end in terms of making faculty feel comfortable with that new kind of amount of data and the role, like what can they infer, what they can't infer, and trying to do a couple presentations about data bias. You know, we don't want to have any negative impacts or unintended consequences of this work. But hoping that, you know, it really will help us talk more about equity and student learning overall across the college and create some of that evidence for our accreditor that we're using the data, not just to make individual course changes, which we know all of our faculty are doing every term, but kind of lifting it up and using it in other ways across the college. We're partnering a lot more. We didn't really even have a co-curricular committee until last year. But now our student academic assessment committee, the one that Carly sits on, and our co-curricular learning initiative team can get together and kind of share like, oh, we've identified this gap in critical thinking, so to speak, and then they can work on programming or bringing in speakers or fun ways to help students engage with that type of work outside of the classroom. So we're excited about where it might lead. I hope this QR code works. Fun fact, I broke my cell phone a couple days ago, and so I made this, but I wasn't able to test it. If it doesn't work, we'll drop the link in the chat, but that should go to the RISE site that, like I said, has a breakdown of the step-by-step assessment process and resources for faculty to use as they go through that work. But I certainly want to put out there a call for questions or discussions about how these practices can be adapted to other institutions. I'm very aware of the different sizes of institutions and how that can have an impact. I always get really jealous when I go to these things and I hear about faculty who come together and they do norming sessions, and I talk to them and they have like 70 full-time faculty. And I'm like, well, that's why you can do that. But I also realize that with the large number of faculty and the resources that I have, like I can give plenty of people a project comp to do this work, and other institutions can't do that. So interested in any, let's see. We're interested in looking at moving from the competency tool to the outcomes tool in Brightspace. I don't know the difference, and I was wondering that myself the other day. Like I said, we spent a good term kind of working with the competency tool and learning how to make that work for us. So I'd have to learn more about the outcomes tool to see if we were going to transition or not. Or do you have experience with the outcomes tool in Brightspace, Will?
Okay, sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, we started playing with it maybe about a year ago, and there's definitely some advantages. I like it. I like some of the features, including having a mastery view of the gradebook. It's really cool from a faculty perspective to be able to see all the skills that you might be assessing in a course and be able to see a snapshot of the whole course, all the students for each of those skills, how the instructor basically put them in, like you said, like a 1 through 4 scale or something like that. You can see it all color coded, like really clean, easy to spot, right embedded in the course. So that's like a really cool feature. There's some great things about it. There's also some limitations we've found though. And one thing to know is you cannot use both the competency tool and the outcomes tool in the same Brightspace course. So you can't play with it at the same time. You'd have to do a separate course. So it requires that you choose one essentially per course. So I'd recommend playing around with it in one of your courses and see how faculty like it. But we're very early stages with using it.
Yeah, and I think we have a team that's looking at like micro-credentialing for students and kind of giving these skills-based badges. And so I think they were looking at the outcomes tool as a way to kind of help track some of that. And so it's good to know that we can't use both, because I don't know if they knew that. Thank you, appreciate it. See, I told you I learned a lot from these. Well, as I mentioned, my email's here, as is Judith and Carly's. If anyone has any questions or wants me to show you, the dashboard more hands-on, or if you have questions about the back end, I can get you in touch with our business analyst who helps maintain that and can explain how all the pieces talk to each other. Happy to share any information we have.
Yeah, and we'll have to check out the learning outcomes tool, because we just acquired the competencies tools because we have a scaled up competency-based education initiative. So we really wanted to be able to use those tools. And I think in the past, when we had the learning outcomes, it wasn't as robust. We might have needed to pay for a better, or maybe they just revamped it. I know D2L often works on their different tools. And so I definitely thanks Lisa for the suggestion. And also, we'll check it out to see how that might help continuing this work.
Yeah, the data reporting, like as of a year ago, was pretty much non-existent. So that was a huge problem. You can basically look at it at the course level, but that's it. But now they've been adding more and more of the tables. There's a ton of them in the data hub now, but that's just the raw data. You'd have to put it into your SAS and then really see what you could get out of it. Some people have probably figured out way more than I have to like which tables to use for what, but it does look like it would be pretty cool.
Thank you. Well, I told you we wouldn't stand between anybody and their lunch, so I do talk fast.
Well, we're happy to stay on if there are more questions, but in the meantime, thanks so much for attending, and we'll be here for a few more minutes to see if there are more questions. Thanks for joining us today.